Hi there. In this video, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing fractions. It's important that we know how to multiply and divide numbers before we do this. Okay, and let's talk about what a fraction is. And a fraction is simply division that can't be simplified to an integer. So for example, if I were to look at the fraction, say 24 divided by 6, or 24 sixths, okay, that number can be divided and we'll get an integer out of that. So 24 divided by 6 can be simplified down to 4. Okay, but if I had, say, 1/2, okay, 1 divided by 2, this is not going to be a whole number, all right? It can't be an integer, all right? And this is going to give me a decimal value of 0.5. But that's what we do. If we can do the division and we get a number, we're good. But if we do the division and it gives us a decimal like this, then we also often have to leave it in fraction form, okay? So a fraction is simply just a number, all right? It's just a different kind of number. And we can operate with those. And it's easiest to multiply and divide fractions before we add and subtract. Now, before we go through this, let's talk about the parts of a fraction. My top part is what I call my numerator. My bottom part is called my denominator. Okay? And so when I do this, I'm going to use these terms, the numerator and the denominator. I'm also going to use the phrase top and bottom part of my fraction. Okay? And the way to remember some of these, this one's easy to remember, but numerator and denominator is kind of harder. The denominator starts with the letter D. And I think of the word down when I think of talking about these two things. Okay, so let's talk about multiplying fractions first. So when I multiply fractions, here are the steps. I want to multiply my numerators, multiply my denominators, and then simplify. Okay, so if I just draw arrows when I do this. So I'm going to do 2 times 4, and that's going to give me a value of 8. And then I do 3 times 5, and I get 15. Now, the next thing that I do is I look to see, can I simplify this? Is there a number that I can divide into 8 and 15 to make my numbers smaller? And the answer to this question is no, all right? This is my answer for this problem, okay? But let's look at an example where we do have to actually simplify. Okay, so on this example, I'm going to multiply the number 5/6 times the number 2/4. So when I multiply this, I'm simply just going to multiply across just like I had. All right, so I'm going to multiply my numerators, and I'm going to get 5 times 2 is 10. Multiply my denominators and get 6 times 4, which is 24. Now, when I look at these numbers here, what I see is that I can divide each of these by a common number. And that number is going to be 2. So I can divide this by 2 and divide this by 2. And so from there, 10 divided by 2 is going to give me 5. 24 divided by 2 is going to give me 12. All right. So while 10/24 is an answer, this is what we want. All right. That's going to make you and me both happy. So when we're doing division, dividing fractions, it's very similar to what we were doing. It's just we add another step, all right, from multiplication. So what we do is we multiply by the reciprocal. And what that means is that we keep the first fraction, we change the sign from division to multiplication, and then we flip the second fraction, and then we just multiply. All right, so let's look at an example. So let's say that I have the number 3/4, and we're dividing that by 2/5. Okay, so 3/4 divided by 2/5 can be rewritten as 3/4 times 5/2. Okay, so remember, all I did was I kept my first fraction the same. I changed my multiplication sign or my division sign to a multiplication sign, and I flipped my second fraction. Okay, and then all we have to do is a multiplication problem, and that's something that we've already done. So let's multiply across. Let's do 3 times 5 and 4 times 2. So as a result, that's going to give us 3 times 5 is 15, 4 times 2 is 8. And those numbers can't be simplified. There's no number that I can divide into 15 and 8 that's the same. So that's my answer. In my last example, what I want to do is I'm going to divide 7/8 by 1/4, okay? And so 7/8 divided by 1/4, I want to first rewrite this as 7/8 times 4/1. And when I do this, I simply just multiply across. 7 times 4 and 8 times 1. So as a result, 7 times 4 gives me 28. 8 times 1 is simply 8. Now, these numbers can be divided by a common number. All right, and I know that my largest common number is going to be 4. So I can divide each of these numbers by 4, and it's going to simplify. 28 divided by 4 is going to be 7. 8 divided by 4 is going to be 2. All right, and that's my answer. Now, if I had 28 over 8, and I was trying to simplify this, and I'm like, well, I know that 2 goes into it. So if I divide each of these by 2, then that's going to give me 28 divided by 2 is 14. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then I say, oh, well, if I look at that, I can simplify that further. I could keep dividing that number, each of those, by 2 to get down to a common number of 7/2. All right. So if you can think of the largest possible number to simplify this down to the most simple explanation you can, or simple answer you can. But if you've got to do a couple steps, that's okay. Now remember a couple things. Remember that this is, we're going to do this with positive and negative numbers. All right. So I'm still going to use this concept in class. All right, but again, I just want to be able to do the math and then look at the signs. Positive and a negative is going to give me a negative. Negative and a positive is going to give me a negative as well. So I want to make sure I use that. And then come to the realization that fractions, they're just numbers, okay? They're just different kinds of numbers, all right? So try not to be scared of fractions and try to think of fractions as your friend. Because once you figure out how to operate with fractions and how to use them, fractions really aren't that bad and they're not that scary. So hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.